Hello, today I am at a location I've wanted to visit for a very long time. This is a very haunted place. This is on par with Borley Rectory as a haunted place in terms of its infamy. This is Langenhoe, the old churchyard at Langenhoe. The church has gone, demolished, so what I expect to find is a field with gravestones and a nice atmosphere. A lot of people say it's got a foreboding atmosphere, so let's find out. Langenhoe Church was built in the 14th century. It was damaged quite significantly during the Essex earthquake of 1884 and finally demolished in 1962. It was believed by many to have been the most haunted church in England. To understand the hauntings, we must go back to 1937, when a certain Reverend Ernest Merriweather became the rector. Soon after he arrived at Langenhoe, he began to experience strange happenings. Initially, it began with small things. The small case he used to carry his vestments, his church attire and his books began inexplicably locking itself, and he was not able to unlock it until he had left the church and was down the lane. On the 20th of September 1937, whilst the Reverend was alone in the church, on a still autumn day, the west door suddenly slammed with an almighty force, so hard that it seemed to shake the entire church. Recorded in his diary, there were many entries explaining typical poltergeist activity, commonly known to be associated with haunted places. Thereafter followed a seeming lull for several years. Then on the 28th of September 1950, whilst in the vestry, the Reverend Merriweather heard the sound of a young woman singing. It seemed to come from the west side of the building. When the music faded, the sound of a man's heavy footsteps could be heard walking slowly up the aisle. Merriweather quickly entered the church from the vestry, only for the sound to suddenly stop, and there he found the church completely empty. A week later, the vicar arrived to find two workmen crouched down by the west door, peeping through the keyhole. When the Reverend looked for himself, he discovered singing could be heard coming from the empty church. Other strange happenings continued, and then one Christmas Eve in 1950, the Reverend witnessed an apparition suddenly appear, glide across the nave and disappear into the pulpit. He described it as possibly a man in a tweed suit. Other times, whilst carrying out his regular Sunday services, he witnessed a female figure in late medieval or Tudor dress cross at the west end of the church and disappear into a wall. He has experienced the sensation of being watched, only to turn around and see a lady in a modern cream dress suddenly vanish as soon as he laid eyes upon her. Once, when the Reverend took a small penknife from his pocket, he heard a woman say, "You are a cruel man." At the time, The Reverend didn't know that the area had long been rumoured to be haunted. Those earlier rumours tell of a lady in black walking the area, and from 1908, two sisters who reported seeing the figure of a nun walk up the path and through the wall of the church into what would have been the West End. Other phenomena that was known to happen was the moving of objects, seemingly disappearing only to be found in a completely different area of the church, and strange and mysterious odours were often witnessed. Strange happenings were not only restricted to the church, but also found their way to nearby Langenhoe Hall. When the Reverend was being shown a room that commanded nice views over the marshes, the owner seemed uffish and said the room gave her the creeps. When the Reverend turned to leave the room, he seemed to be embraced by the ghost of a naked lady, which lasted mere seconds, but he was very certain that it happened. As well as connections with the hauntings, Langenhoe Hall has witnessed 3 suicides. In the 19th century, an owner lost all 9 of his children and the mother shortly after the last child. In the First World War, the owner of the estate committed suicide by jumping out of a plane over the English Channel. The next owner failed to make a success as a businessman and drowned himself in a sluice pipe. Langenhoe Rectory and also the nearby village have had their fair share of strange and mysterious deaths. The Reverend Merriweather retired in 1959 when the church closed and combined its services with the neighbouring parish of Abberton. It was finally demolished in 1962 and the Reverend passed away in 1965. Let us now look at the Waldegrave or the Waldegrave connection with Borley and Langenhoe. Hauntings at Langenhoe seem in many ways to echo those at Borley, with a local church and a manor house connection, a lady in black, a ghostly nun, singing and music emanating from an empty church, problems with door locks, items mysteriously disappearing and reappearing elsewhere. The lady in black is said to be Arabella Waldegrave, sweetheart of an earlier vicar at Langenhoe, who upon discovering she was pregnant with his baby, murdered her. It mirrors a very similar story and legend that's attached with Borley, and a monk and a nun eloping together, and the nun being bricked up in the old Borley house. In 1589, Nicholas Waldegrave, Lord of the Manor of Borley, acquired also the Manor of Langenhoe by marrying one Catherine Brown. Catherine Brown had been left the estate of Langenhoe by her father, Sir Anthony Brown, who died in 1583. The Waldegrave family was a well-known Roman Catholic family. Nicholas's father had been important during the reign of Queen Mary, but was persecuted under Queen Elizabeth and had been imprisoned in the Tower of London. Whatever may be the case, we know that the Waldegrave family were in ownership of both Borley and Langenhoe at the same time, and certainly the same rector shared the ministries of Borley and Langenhoe around the time of the Waldegrave ownership. At least two of these rectors, who were appointed by Philip Waldegrave, were transferred from Borley to Langenhoe, being William Plain in 1662 and Thomas Muriel in 1681. So the connection between Langenhoe and Borley through the Waldegrave family, or the Waldegrave family, certainly cannot be denied. And the way the hauntings seem to mirror each other most definitely must give one pause for thought. Most definitely must give one pause for thought. Pause for thought. Must give one pause for thought. Most definitely pause for thought. Wow. That is Langenhoe. Langenhoe, old Langenhoe churchyard. Very haunted place apparently.